There we go. Does that looks like it's...
That looks like it's worked, yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, so yes, welcome everybody. Really good to see you all this morning for our Mind Matters session that's part of the PG Wellbeing Week. I hope you're all enjoying that and engaging in all the various activities that are going on. So yeah, today we're here just to provide some practical advice and guidance to help you think about your wellbeing and look at some areas which commonly affect PG students during their time of research and during their studies. And we also will hopefully provide some skills for life in sort of looking after your well-being and resilience. Okay, so we'll look at the outline of the session. I'll just introduce ourselves. So I am Alice Haslam. There we are, that's it, that's our names. So yeah, I'm Alice Haslam and I work in the Researcher Academy and I'm a PGR Welfare and EDI Officer. I'll let Sandra say hello.
Hello everyone, I'm Sandra Rose and Alice and I do the same job role, so I'm also a PGR Welfare and EDI Officer, also based in the Researcher Academy.
Yeah, okay, so just to run through an outline of the session then. So yeah, just a few housekeeping, as Sandra mentioned, if you could just mute your mics while the presentation's happening, that'd be just helpful for sound quality, etc. But do feel free to pop your mic on, pop your camera on when we're, looking at questions and when we do our little wellbeing activity where we just share some tips and advice for wellbeing. So please do that. That would be great. Yeah, so just take part as much as you feel comfortable with. It does help with engagement of the session, but yeah, if you prefer the chat rather than popping cameras on, that's absolutely fine. So there's no wrong answers here. This is a really, positive and encouraging space to share our ideas and our personal experiences. Oh yeah, EDI, yeah, apologies, terrible for acronyms, I think at the university, aren't we, but it's equality, diversity and inclusion. So mainly we provide kind of wellbeing support and welfare support as a sort of primary part of our role, but we also work on equality and diversity and inclusion projects as well. So yeah, thanks for that, Karen. Okay, so please post any comments or questions in the chat as Karen has. We'll monitor that throughout and answer them probably at the end, or if there's a convenient point and we want to answer at that time, then we will do that at a point in the session. Okay, so we are going to cover three main topics today: isolation, motivation, and we'll also look at imposter phenomenon. So these are things that are just common and relevant to many PhD and PG researchers. And we'll just cover some ways to manage those feelings. So then we'll move on to our wellbeing activity, which is just talking about 5 ways to wellbeing and looking at your sort of 5 top tips for wellbeing. So please get involved, have a think about the things you do that boost your mood and that help you when you're feeling low. It'd be great to hear those. So then we'll look at self-care. So we'll cover some important self-care basics, some common sense advice, but things that if actively implemented can really help to boost mood, and thinking about prioritising those. And then we will look at creating a wellbeing plan. So this is a sort of practical thing that you can do, that you can take away from this session, to think about writing a wellbeing plan and really looking after those areas of your life. So we'll share the template for that, and it's just a good way of taking today's session forward and thinking out about how it applies to your life. So then we'll finish up with some questions and finish up the session. So yeah, please ask us anything at the end if you'd like to. Okay, Sandra, over to you.
Thanks, Alice. So we're going to talk a little bit now about sort of feelings of isolation, and obviously this has been a topic that's been extremely relevant as we've all been navigating through the pandemic. But even before that, sort of working towards a PhD can often feel like a very isolating experience. You are the only person that is doing your particular project with your particular set of supervisors, and it can be hard to sort of make connections with others either in your department or the wider university. So throughout the pandemic, it's been harder still, which is obviously difficult, and we recognise that. And it's been a long time now where we've been having to operate in these sort of restricted and difficult circumstances. So we understand there might have been a lot less opportunity to connect with peers, with colleagues and friends, both within the university and externally. Hopefully, crossing every set of fingers we have, things are now sort of slowly moving back to face-to-face. The university is certainly moving in that direction and encouraging more sort of opportunities for face-to-face connections. But even that in itself can feel a little bit overwhelming when we've all been operating sort of mainly from home, for example, or in very certain circumstances of only maybe going into our labs and then back and things like that. So if you are feeling a bit overwhelmed and a little bit isolated, just recognize that that is perfectly normal and understandable, and it's okay, and you can take the sort of settling back into face-to-face at your own pace, and start thinking about how you might want to start building some new relationships with peers, connecting with people you've known previously, especially if you started your studies during the pandemic. You just haven't had that normal start necessarily where you got to meet other people at the beginning and things like that. So we recognize all of that can be really difficult, and it's about just taking your time with it and building up slowly. We have some ideas here on this slide. We will share these slides at the end for you in terms of all the links, but just ideas about how you might want to, some places you might want to start in terms of sort of building up your connections and working on ways to maybe feel a bit less isolated. So just start to give it some thought, really, if you haven't done so far. Look at maybe any societies or networks you might be interested in joining. Don't ever feel that the societies are for undergrads only. There are lots and lots of societies, and they're very open and welcoming to people at every stage of their studies. And there's also a postgraduate network, which you'd be very welcome to join. We put 2 links on there. One to the postgraduate network and one to an activity list where you can just have a browse and see all the different kind of societies. And if you didn't quite join some when you started, it's absolutely fine to get in touch with an area of interest, a society you're interested in, and ask about joining now. It's absolutely not a problem. You haven't missed the boat. So just think about that. It can be a really nice way to meet people in different bits of the university, away from your subject area maybe, and just sort of start to make some new friends, which can be really nice. There is a specific sort of group called Adapt Together. It's available to postgraduate researchers only, and it's a peer support scheme. So it was created because we recognise that postgraduate researchers have less of the structured time that, say, undergraduates or postgraduate taught students may have in terms of seminars, lectures and things like that. Postgraduate researchers have much less opportunity for sort of structured peer connections. So the scheme was created to allow people to make groups and in areas they're interested in with fellow PGRs, so postgraduate researchers, and Adapt Together have a SharePoint site you can click on there. You can create a group if you want to start one, or you can join an existing group, and they do all sorts of activities throughout the year. So they run something called Adapt Together Voices, which is a seminar series, and they have different guest speakers coming in to talk about things which might be of interest to postgraduate researchers. There's one later today on imposter phenomenon, run by the Careers Service. There's other ones dotted throughout the year. And they also do training sessions if you're interested in learning about Adapt and/or joining. So you can find all that information on their SharePoint site. Another good thing to do if you're not sure where to start would be to look at the Researcher Academy and just look at their training and workshops. They have a brilliant offer, brilliant program kind of running throughout the year, and you can join up to anything you're interested in. And that's also a nice way to just spend some time with people, mainly online at the moment still, but transitioning to some face-to-face events as well. And if you are feeling a bit overwhelmed, and I'm speaking from personal experience about heading back to campus, just start to maybe plan in the odd day here and there to build yourself back up. It might not be, you might not feel overwhelmed about it, and that's great. But if you are, don't worry, other people are feeling the same, and just sort of take it steady, start planning things in, and look out for events, drop-ins happening in your school, faculty, or the Researcher Academy. There's always lots going on, and actually it can be quite easy to miss things. And then maybe you find out about it after and wish you'd been able to go. So just keep an eye on things like the Researcher Academy newsletter, which comes out. Keep an eye on your faculty pages, your school pages, to see what sort of things people are doing and if you'd be interested in joining. Okay, back to you, Alice.
That's great, thanks Sandra. Yeah, I just popped the Adapt link in there. I thought that might be useful. It's come up huge, so sorry about that. But yeah, we will share the slides after for all the other links. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about motivation. So low motivation is a really common issue amongst researchers, amongst postgraduate students, and it's certainly something we've talked about a lot, in support calls over, during the pandemic and generally, really. So it can feel at times that you are much less motivated to study, and it's just hard to sit down or read and write. So some things that you can do to help with that. Just try to not to lose sight of your longer term goals. Why you started the PhD in the first place. It can be easy to sort of get bogged down in current issues, especially at the moment, lots of things on the news and things like that. But keeping your eyes on the prize can be really helpful. So do you have a career or field of interest that you're working towards? Are you doing this for, because you just love the project and thinking about what you can come out of it at the end. So just can you re-spark your enthusiasm for what got you here in the beginning, and writing that down, keeping sight of it is just really helpful. Also celebrating successes, small, medium or big, all the successes, the little achievements, they're really worth celebrating, noticing and giving yourself a pat on the back for it can be really helpful. So these can be your own successes or those of a colleague or your supervisor, just sharing in each other's joy and achievements. It can be really helpful, especially during these pandemic times. The small things are definitely big things as well. Rewards, if you're sort of motivated by rewards, then they can be really good. So if you're struggling to feel motivated and you celebrate a small success, just as reading a journal and attending lab meetings, these slides are a little bit science-based, so sorry if you're not in those faculties, those students we work with a lot. Or meeting with your supervisor, go for a coffee afterwards, take some time off afterwards to sort of do something you enjoy, take a walk, something to look forward to if there's something that feels a little bit challenging or you're struggling with when you've got low motivation. Talk these feelings through. Colleagues will certainly have experienced similar feelings. So discuss them, see them as a natural part of your PhD journey. Don't be worried about speaking to supervisor or others in your group, people that you are around, because losing motivation is certainly not a weakness. And colleagues can often offer advice on what helped them to recover their motivation. It's really hard to keep that up for a 3-year, 4-year PhD or a long postgraduate programme, so just keep that in mind. Okay. So thinking about looking after yourself, that does link through everything that we talk about today. So if we're not looking after ourselves, we will likely find that our motivation will dip. So please do prioritise your own well-being first and foremost. Building those things into your day will often see a natural improvement to your motivation. Think about what times of day that you work best. Some of us are morning people and some are definitely night owls. So if you're more energised in the morning, that could be a good time to tackle more complex work. Or perhaps if you're better in the evening, that's the time to prioritise those sort of tasks when you know that you're going to be most kind of switched on. So just try and take notice of what works better for you and plan your time accordingly. But please do be aware of sleep patterns. If you are a night owl, that's great, but preserving your sleep and making sure that you're prioritising time for good sleep is really important. It's not the sort of thing that you can do long term without that really affecting you. So just think about getting in place those basics. Sleeping, eating well and exercising regularly will all help you feel more energised and able to cope with low motivation. We will look a bit more at those basics of self-care later in the session. But just remember that how important it is to take time to rest and recover as part of your self-care as well. It can often feel like, yes, I need to be doing all these things for my studies and also exercising and being out socialising, doing things with friends. It's quite exhausting. So rest is a really important self-care technique as well. So just remember as well that these feelings are temporary and they will change. We all, experience times of motivation. We can't be all fully switched on and motivated all the time. So just, have faith, keep going with it and know that you will, if you put some of these things in place particularly, things will change and you will start to feel more motivated and be able to really, move forward on that. Okay. Okay, so just to build on that really, a lot of people find it helpful to look at this human function curve. I hope you can see it okay. I'm just going to maximise my screen just yeah, that definitely does help to just bring that through a little bit. So yeah, when we're talking about stress and motivation, etc., it can feel that, you know, we all need to remove all stress from our life and just be zen and doing yoga all of the time. But if you look at this curve, you know, if you were doing that and had no stress in your life completely, you'd be completely over here on the left, where actually you're quite inactive and underloaded. So, you know, removing anything like that from your life just leads to boredom, to apathy, poor motivation. You can feel frustrated and sort of under-involved. So it's trying to find the sort of level of stress, if you like, level of adrenaline, level of stretching yourself to move more into the middle of this curve. So if you're moving up more into your optimum peak performance area, and note where the comfort zone is, you know, the comfort zone is there, that's where you're sort of happy and relaxed, but just pushing yourself out of that, pushing those stress levels a little bit, recognizing that it's sometimes quite difficult, but, you know, doing some tasks that I find quite challenging, it really does lead to that more sort of optimal load. So you feel more alert, more decisive, more creative, you're stimulated, you're challenged, you've got more high energy, and that's the nice area that we want to be in, really. So, you know, we've got the pressure and levels of stress along the bottom here, and then the ability to cope and performance on the vertical axis. So you want to be somewhere in the middle there, and everything's functioning and firing away, and it's great. But when we're talking about being too stressed, you know, your stress levels and your adrenaline levels are just way too high. That's when we start to get over here to the right and deterioration kicks in. So you start to feel reduced efficiency and activity, low self-esteem, you're more irritable, anxious or exhausted. If those are more the feelings that you're feeling and it's because of your stress and you're overloaded, that's where, you know, that's where we don't want to be. And that's when it becomes an impact on your health and obviously an impact on your studies. So that's where these self-help techniques can come in. But as a student, it's just worth keeping in mind that function curve, because you being at university, you are pushing yourself, you know, you are putting yourself in that middle zone, and that can be a really good thing. But keeping an eye on the stress levels is really important. So hopefully you'll find that helpful.
Thank you, Alice. So we're going to move on to imposter phenomenon now. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the term. It's previously been called imposter syndrome, but the language is sort of moving away from syndrome because that makes it sort of sound like it's a medicalized condition. And so people tend to talk about it more as imposter phenomenon now. So you may be familiar with it, you may not, but we'll talk through the definition and what it is, how you might have been experiencing it. Even if that was unconsciously, without having a name for it, you might find you experience it, and look at some ways that might help. So I'll read out this definition, although it's there for you also. It's so imposter phenomenon is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own effort or skills. It can be really common among anyone at all, but often among postgraduate researchers who are sort of holding a bit of an internal belief that they're not good enough, they don't belong in this research environment. Often, you know, research can feel really competitive. You're often with people who you perceive to have had more success than you at this stage and things like that, and that can all build into sort of that sort of internal feeling that you don't feel you're worthy of your place here. Even despite lots and lots of proven evidence of your ability, and it can create a significant amount of anxiety. And, you know, people can feel that they are going to be found out, inverted commas, or exposed as a fraud. So, you know, you may feel that you've had moments where you felt that way. It can flare at any point during your PhD. So it could be triggered by something specific, sort of a big thing that comes up where you may be speaking at a conference for the first time, say, or some of the sort of pressure points where you're sort of working towards passing your review for the year. Or it could be something you often have in the back of your mind, just a sort of little niggling doubt that you don't feel that you have earned your place and are worthy of it. And it can also really make it feel difficult to accept your own accomplishments. So you might find you're focusing a lot on negatives or perceived mistakes and actually not sort of celebrating and cherishing and really sort of noticing all the accomplishments that you've made. I'm sure most people can relate to feeling that way at different times. Alice and I certainly have our moments of imposter phenomenon. It's really common. but it doesn't have to sort of be this thing that dominates all of your thinking. So even just having a name for it, recognizing what it is and thinking about ways that might help can be really helpful. So let me just, oh, my slides have decided not to move, bear with me. Here we go. So some little ways that can help: keep a note of your positive feedback, pop it in an email file, just sort of, you know, when you get some good feedback, even if it feels like just a small amount from a supervisor, say, make a note of it, and then you can look back on it at a different time. And it's amazing how, you know, if you're busy, working hard, always thinking about the next thing that's coming up, you almost don't even recognize that someone has said, oh, you did really well on X, or, you know, that piece of writing was really good. And just sort of re-looking back at those can give you a real boost and help remind you of them if you maybe haven't taken them on board at the time. Another good thing to do is talking to others. It can feel quite hard to admit that you have those feelings, but they're experienced by academics at all levels, and you would be so, you know, you might be surprised to find that maybe your supervisor has experienced this, you know, your colleagues, definitely. It's always worth just chatting it through. And that takes some of the sting out of it, and it's actually really nice sometimes to just share with someone else, and you might find they say, oh yes, I've experienced that as well. Do remember that these feelings can be most acute when you are going through a transition, trying a new thing, and actually the more you practice something, the more confident you feel in it, and you might find that those feelings of doubt sort of do lessen. So if you felt really worried about giving a presentation, say to colleagues, to peers, or people in your faculty, you might find for that first one you feel so incredibly nervous, but then actually the more and more you do it, even though it feels hard each time and you are going to feel some nerves potentially, the more you do it, it does start to ease a little bit as you build up your experience. And that old adage of practice makes perfect does ring true. It is helpful and useful, and it might not happen straight away, but the more and more you do things, the more it will hopefully start to feel a little easier. And just remember that if you're stretching yourself, as we were talking about with the function curve, it is nerve-wracking and you can sort of doubt your abilities, but the more you do it, the more confident you'll start to feel. Also, although it's so easy to do, try not to compare yourself to your peers. Every research journey is completely unique. So it might be that someone has a paper published, say, or is a named author on something before you, or go to a conference, all of which is absolutely fine. Each journey is different, and everyone sort of experiences things at a different pace, and that's completely normal. And it depends on what research you're doing, what area, what opportunities your supervisor knows about, all sorts of different things. The next one's tricky, but really important. So try and develop a healthy relationship with mistakes. So they happen, and they're actually a really normal part of your research journey. They're actually going to probably be some of the things that help shape your final research once it's finished. Sometimes it's the mistakes that lead you on to the next thing that you want to do. And mistakes are a natural thing that happen to us as human beings, and it's not a reflection on your abilities or anything like that. So just try and sort of develop a healthy relationship with mistakes, and don't link them to sort of your worthiness to be here. Because imposter phenomenon is sort of a pattern of thinking, it can be really helpful to try counselling or CBT to sort of train your mind to kind of reframe those thoughts, basically. And our university counselling service do run some excellent courses on perfectionism and procrastination and things like that, which are very linked to sort of imposter phenomenon, and they can be really helpful just to sort of get their expertise, and also see what other people do, what techniques they use, and that you're not alone in those feelings. So if you are interested in those, we have a link to the counselling service at the end, and you can access all of their workshops there. Okay, so we now would ask for a little bit of input from you guys, if that's okay. And we wondered if anyone would feel comfortable sharing in the chat any tips they have for wellbeing. So it can be general wellbeing, it can be wellbeing specifically linked to how you're managing your wellbeing throughout your PhD, anything you found useful during the pandemic, or anything at all really. So if anyone has any tips they would like to share or feel comfortable to do so, please pop them in the chat, or if you wanted to pop your hand up and switch your camera on, you're very welcome. Give people a few minutes to think. There's no wrong answers, there's no pressure. It's just sometimes really interesting to hear what other people do.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll give people a few moments to just have a think and type in.
Putting you under pressure now, guys.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we've often been so interested by the amount of academics that have admitted to being an imposter, haven't we? You know, we've been in sessions, so yeah, I know it's so easy to feel like your supervisory team or your academics that you work with have got it all sorted, but they often feel that way as well, and it's just pushing through it, isn't it? And yeah, remind yourself. Yeah.
Does anyone, oh, we got some, yeah, get some fresh air, go for a walk. That's a really good one. And that's obviously easy to miss if you're at home all day, sort of working from home. Particularly when getting to campus was much more restricted. So you can realise you haven't really popped outside and seen the sort of sunshine for a whole day, which when you think about it is obviously going to not be great for your well-being.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Adam has a log of the work you do each day, so it helps you to plan. Yes, yeah, and I think, yeah, I'm a big fan of a to-do list, which is a similar sort of thing, and it's so nice sometimes just to be crossing that off.
Definitely, yeah. We read an article recently, didn't we, about a ta-da list. So rather than it being a to-do list, you know, it's like ta-da. That, you know, keeping a log is almost like making a list of things that, look what I did, you know, ta-da, this is my work, and I quite liked that. So yeah, I think that can be really useful and can just formulate what you're doing next day and things like that, can't you? So we've got lots pinging in now, which is great.
So yes, on imposter phenomenon, you can be both smart and excel in research and also be very self-critical and doubt yourself, and they can both be true at the same time. And that's exactly it. Yeah, those doubts can be there, but it does not mean you're not doing a good job. So yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that, Carolina. And yes, counselling service are great around imposter phenomenon, perfectionism, procrastination, all of those things.
Definitely, yeah.
Karen creates a clear schedule. And boundaries, yes, that's another really important thing, which can so easily blur when you're in the middle of your studies, and it sort of feels like there's not a natural end point to your day. You could be doing more reading, you could be doing more writing, you could be doing X, Y, and Z, but actually those recovery times and those rest times are as important as the times you're working, and the more you can build in your recovery and rest, the better you will work. So it's just about giving those things as much priority as your work, which can feel hard to do, but it's really important. And someone said having coffee chats with all the postgrads, yeah, that's really nice. Sharing problems, sport, eating more, meditation, brilliant. Yep, well, great.
And that meditation works really well for some people. It can be really, really good. There's apps like Headspace and a few others. Yeah, Calm, I think one of them's called, which can sort of help you with guided meditations. So that can definitely help with that.
So being part of a team, visiting family tea and a chat with Nana. I love that. That's really nice. And yeah, that's going back to those sort of connections that we talked about. And, you know, we've all had experiences of not being able to make those connections as much. So actually having them back is a real joy. And again, planning, baking, which is a really good one. Send friends a message.
Yeah, baking something, making something, you know, crafts of all kinds are really great, aren't they, for just switching your brain into that different sort of mode and having a break from all the thinking about your work, definitely.
Yeah, and working 6 till midnight, you know, you can almost do that without realising, and then all of a sudden you're wondering why you might feel completely overworked and burnt out, and then you're sort of reflecting back, isn't it?
Definitely not sustainable. You know, it can be, you know, master's study is a year-long course. People often do it at that point. Oh, I just got this year to do this and I need to go. But yeah, it's really not a good long-term strategy for sure.
That's a really good one here as well. Scheduling and taking holidays. Issues that seem unsurmountable are often absolutely nothing once I've had a few days away. And that is such a big thing. Sometimes people aren't clear about time that they can take off, or each department and school seems to operate differently how you request the leave and stuff. But having those days off is so important. And again, it's like finishing for the evening. It gives you rest time, it gives you recovery time, you come back fresher with new ideas. It all actually contributes to your work. You must never ever feel that you're so busy you can't take time off, then just heading towards feeling incredibly run down. So several short walks throughout the day rather than one long one. That's nice. Yeah, breaks up the day a bit more.
Yeah, some people talked about doing almost like a fake commute, didn't they, when it was a lot of working from home. And if you find that, yeah, you work from home a lot, you like doing that, but just perhaps in the morning, you know, walking around the block is like, oh, I've arrived at work. It can just mentally kind of put you in that place where you're working. Yeah, and then take a break later with a walk. Yeah.
And things that you find soothing, they all sound really soothing, Maria. And if you do find something that you know you find soothing, or setting aside some time for yourself, even that is a positive act, because you are separating some time to have a bath, say, and you're not working at that time, you are recovering and resting. Checking in, more thumbs up for the to-do list.
Yeah, I think checking in with others, yeah, you know, that helps your own well-being. You know, you feel you're looking out for your friends, you're looking out with your colleagues, just chatting and being there for someone can actually be really rewarding yourself, and that you feel, you know, just better about things.
And reading, taking care of plants. Oh, I'm doing that, Angela. I'm trying to keep some plants alive, but I do feel really good when they're starting to blossom and bloom. And baking, so yeah, any relaxing activities, and all of those things keep you in the moment as well, which is nice.
Gardening is really mindful, isn't it? And in the moment, just having your hands in the soil, planting some things, is really, really good.
Someone talked about chatting to their supervisor, and I think that's really important too. And yeah, it's being open and honest with your supervisor if you are feeling a bit overwhelmed or struggling, and you will find they are so wanting to help, and they all have been through similar things themselves, you know, and they understand what it's like to do a PhD and how hard it can be. And so just sharing that can be really, really helpful.
Maria is a PhD mama, and I love that. And yeah, spending time with other mums and having your weekend together and get out all your stories, definitely. I think there needs to be an Adapt PhD Mama group.
Yes,
that would be a really good word name for it. I'd encourage you, Maria, to reach out through Adapt, you know, to just maybe start a group, because I think parents and carers that are also doing all of this, you've got a lot in common and a lot to talk over.
Yeah, just sharing it can be so helpful. When I had my daughter and she just didn't sleep much, just talking to other mums about that was just like a balm almost. It was so comforting to just kind of share it, even though it wasn't solved. It was comforting to share it.
Carolina's just saying that perhaps not all supervisors are unfortunately supportive or accommodating. Absolutely. You know, we're dealing with personalities here, aren't we? And it's not natural for everyone. So I think it's really important to find someone who is, because it's not always going to be that person, but I think there'd be certainly somebody in your school. Sometimes there's PG tutors or somebody that's got a bit of more of a welfare role for PGs and PGRs, or there's certainly your support and wellbeing team. So they are not just there for undergrads. So please remember that, and it can be just really good to speak to someone who's not academic but has got a lot of experience and knowledge in that sort of wellbeing space. If they're unfortunately not that is such a shame, and we try and train them, don't we, Sandra, and encourage that supportiveness. But if that is not there, then do seek out someone that provide you with that, because there will definitely be somebody.
Maybe try someone else in your supervisory team as well. Don't feel you can only go to your main supervisor. But you know, not everyone is, unfortunately, which we are working hard to try and sort of change that. Karen, I'll maybe give you the Adapt Together details, because I don't know if there's a peer group for more mature PhD students as yet, but it might be something that gets set up, or you could set one up if you wanted. So I'll make sure you get those details, have a look on the SharePoint, because again, it's just nice to connect with people in a similar position, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you're doing it a bit later in life, finding everyone's of a certain age group, then reaching out to others that are in the same boat is really helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your ideas with us.
I always love seeing them.
Great. Yeah, there's so many good ones that come through.
Yeah.
So that brings us on to this slide, which we just wanted to sort of reference. I'll just pop someone in from the lobby. Just bear with me, someone's coming in. So this is the winning ways to wellbeing. You might have seen something similar. Sometimes they're a longer list. We quite like this one with 5 points on it. And you know, I'll talk through what they are, but hopefully you'll see that all of the things that people have been popping in kind of fit in these categories. What it's quite nice to do is just to have a look through the 5 different areas and just see if you feel you are doing a lot of one area or maybe a little less of another, and whether you can balance that out a little. So quite a lot of our tips have been to do with connecting, which is the first point here. So talking and listening, being there and feeling connected. So that's a really important one. The next is giving. So it could be your time, your words, your presence. Someone talks about connecting, reaching out to their friends. So that's giving them your time. And as Alice said, sort of doing that, giving can actually feel just as good as getting some support yourself. You know, you are giving your time, giving your energy to one of your friends, for example, which can be really important. Taking notice, so just remembering the simple things that give you joy. So that could be your reading or baking or walking, anything really, but that's around sort of bringing things back to the moment, not necessarily mindfulness if it's not for you, or it could be mindfulness, or it doesn't mean meditation necessarily either. It could just be taking notice of doing something you enjoy and kind of keeping in that moment. It's quite centering, so cooking a meal, say, something like that. Keeping learning, we're all pretty much got this one down, sure, constantly learning, but you can extend that into hobbies, and it's about embracing new experiences, seeing opportunities, surprising yourself, maybe trying something you didn't think you would want to, and things like that. And then being active, which again is a really important one. Obviously, sort of hopefully something you can enjoy, just moving to increase your mood. So obviously it can be walking, it could be a sports team, it could be anything. But what it's quite helpful to do is to take a little look over those 5 and just see if there's an area you feel you could do a little more in. And you might find that really increases your well-being. So it's worth just having a little browse. Okay.
That's great.
There you go, Alice.
Lovely. Yes, so just going to move on now to talking about self-care in a little bit more detail. We've mentioned it quite a bit already, but yeah, I really like this slide just to start off. You know, if our phones get down that low and you're in the red line, then you start to panic, don't you? You think, where's the charger? I need to plug my phone in and I need to charge this up. And it can be very much the same with yourself. You know, sometimes when you're just feeling really low and not motivated, you're just really low on battery, and you need to start thinking about plugging yourself in, doing some of these wonderful things that we've talked about here to just recharge those batteries and make yourself feel stronger. So, you know, just thinking about self-care as a priority and not a luxury, not just something that's nice to have, but it's really worth making time for these things, and then you'll feel, you know, much more boosted and charged up. Yeah, it's one of my favourites too, Karen. I'm always, I used to have this up in my office when I had an office. Okay, next slide, please. Yep, so the self-care basics. So self-care really is anything that makes you feel good, that sparks the joy, and you know, that brings out those feelings, that you're happy and feeling well. So sleep is a really big one. Sleep is definitely a superpower, and it underpins so many mental health issues. Also being active, you know, really big one. Taking exercise, really helpful, and also eating well and keeping hydrated. You know, just those basics, but they often do start to slip, you know, when you're not feeling too good. So we'll look at those in a little bit more detail. Yeah, so exercise particularly is perhaps we'll go back to that slide. Sorry, Sandra, I thought these were going on. Yeah, I'll go back to those and just talk about them in a little bit more detail. So yeah, exercise. You know, evidence has shown that exercise is as effective for mild to moderate depression and anxiety as antidepressants. And so it's something that we often hear from students, is that, you know, running is the one thing that always helps, or climbing, swimming, you know, whatever you enjoy. So if you do nothing else, then building up some exercise into your routine is just so helpful. Eating, you know, loss of appetite can also be a really strong symptom of low mood, or perhaps overeating, having more disordered eating, you know, really can be a bit of a signal that something's wrong. So perhaps have a look at your recent eating habits. You know, have they changed? Do you need to pay a bit more attention to your diet? So cooking foods that you love and that give you comfort is really helpful. Trying to eat at regular times, and perhaps with your housemates or your partner and your family, whenever possible, is really helpful. And just don't forget to drink that water, because it really can make you feel low. And with sleep, yeah, if that is an issue for you, again, I hear that a lot from students. Try keeping a sleep diary, so you can really start to notice the patterns. Is there an issue here? And then perhaps start to implement some techniques, which is often known as sleep hygiene, which is, things like switching off your phone before bed, having reading before bed, having a regular routine, just taking a bath or relaxing, having some time for relaxation before bed. Sleep is a behaviour and it can be retrained over time. That is definitely the good news. So taking some time to work on your sleep, really thinking, I don't just have to put up with this, that I'm not a good sleeper. Putting in some techniques can really help and make you feel, more refreshed in the morning. Okay, so we'll move on to that next slide now. So yeah, it doesn't have to mean that you'll be doing all of these all day, every day perfectly. Just some small changes can make a big difference. So as we said in the chat earlier, having a short daily walk, cooking 1 or 2 meals a week from scratch perhaps, and see how that goes. The sleep diary that I mentioned can be really helpful to make you more aware of unhealthy sleep patterns, and we do share some links to that at the end of the session. So just be aware of any behaviours that affect your mood or stress levels in either a negative or positive way. So perhaps you feel more anxious if you're drinking a lot of coffee or skipping lunch and skipping meals. Or do you feel more relaxed if you cook a meal, take a walk and connect with a friend? And just look at, doing those things regularly. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. Okay, so now we're going to talk about something you can take away and do in your own time, and that's creating a wellbeing plan. It can be a really good way to build resilience, help you manage and survive challenges and bounce back from setbacks. And it's good to do it when you're feeling well, and then it sort of builds a good foundation for when stress builds up, which obviously it does as we go through your PhD journey. So there are 3 simple steps to doing a wellbeing plan. And essentially you spend some time reflecting, you spend some time recording, and then you re-evaluate. So I'm just going to try and pop the link in the chat here, bear with me, to a blank template for you all to have a look at. Please let me know if you can't access that. But I will talk through how you do a wellbeing plan as we go, and you can feel free to sort of take and save that template and work on one in your own time. So the first element of a wellbeing plan is to spend some time reflecting, and this is something you can do once or multiple times, or maybe sort of once every 6 months or something like that. It doesn't have to be a one time only, but if you're starting it from scratch, maybe just look back at the last few months. Are there any skills and strategies you've learned that have helped you manage anxiety and stress? Have you found things like exercise or a good diet or routine is helping you? Have you tried any new hobbies or revived any old ones to help boost your mood? And perhaps you found some new ways to connect with family and friends and more awareness of how important those connections are. So Alice and I have done a couple of these wellbeing plans ourselves, and it's been quite interesting to do them throughout the pandemic. So we did one sort of at the beginning. We both have children. We were mired in sort of homeschooling and working from home all the time and all those sorts of things. So it was interesting to spend some time reflecting how things were going, what was causing us stress, what we were missing, and things like that. Then we actually did another maybe around 6 months later, and that was really useful as well to see if we changed anything, to see if things were anything was sort of working well or wasn't, and whether we wanted to make any more changes. So I found that really helpful. And what we can often find when we're thinking about our own well-being is we don't actually give ourselves the time and space to do any reflection, and actually doing that can be a really important element of our well-being in itself, just looking back and just reflecting on things that are working well and that aren't. So once you've spent a little period of time reflecting, hopefully with a nice cup of tea, maybe a chocolate biscuit, then you would move on to recording. And so maybe writing down 2 or 3 things that have been helpful and that you want to continue. And we do that so it's not too many, don't feel overwhelmed, just maybe picking out two or 3. Oh, and here's some sounds, maybe not muted.
You're all on mute.
Sorry, I think you're not muted. Got some music playing. Could we ask everyone to mute their microphones, please? Thank you. Little musical interlude there. Yeah, so not too many things to record. Don't feel overwhelmed, but just maybe 2 or 3 key things that you found have been helpful and that you want to continue. Then we move on to reevaluating. So that's really thinking and sort of having a look at whether you're happy with how things are or you want to make some reevaluations. So consider how the ideas you've pulled out fit with your values. Setting goals can help you move towards the life you want or the person you want to be. And then importantly, looking at what the barriers to you using these skills are, maybe time, motivation, or negative thoughts. So when Alice and I were doing this during the pandemic, a big barrier was kind of restriction to access anything, time, because we were so busy with sort of homeschooling and stuff. So it was kind of reflecting on those barriers and whether we can find any ways to overcome them. So it could be scheduling or support from friends or family or planning rewards, as we touched on earlier. And then just sometimes having a little consideration of what can I do today to move me towards my goals. And you can apply this in a sort of work, sort of PhD setting or a home setting. I found mine was really focused on home because that was a really big part of, navigating the pandemic and sort of how it fitted into my family life. And again, we're not talking about huge transformational changes necessarily, just some small steps each day in the direction of your goals will help you achieve them. And noticing and rewarding yourself for those actions can just make you feel really good. So it's quite interesting for us to reflect and think, when we first did this plan, we had some barriers and then we worked hard at overcoming them, and we could reflect back on that as well. And as you're doing all of this, don't forget the R's of well-being, so rest, recreation and relationships, and make sure you make time in your well-being plan for these 3 areas. So even if it's sort of primarily focused on your research, for example, do make sure that you're building in the rest, recreation and relationships time as well. Okay.
Great, yeah, so hopefully that'll be helpful for you to take forward. So yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit more here about getting further support and share some resources, etc. So although these feelings of stress, anxiety and low mood are certainly normal and common, you may find that these feelings are becoming more regular or perhaps more difficult to manage on a day-to-day basis. Maybe they're affecting how you would normally live your life. So if you are finding this is the case, then it is really important to reach out for some additional support, above and beyond the sort of self-care things that we've talked about today. So do contact your GP. They're definitely your first point of call if your low mood is feeling really significant. They can offer support and make referrals to other NHS services as needed. The support and wellbeing team, we mentioned them earlier. They are a great team, and there's several people in each faculty that are there to just talk through any problems, any issues that are going on, and let you know about all the support that's available within the university and in the wider NHS, etc. And there's University Counselling Service. Again, we mentioned their groups and workshops, which are really good, but you can also book on for a one-to-one session, in person or online by following that link. So please do use them because they are great. And obviously, if you feel that you need more help more urgently, then do call NHS 111 for advice and support. Okay, so we're just going to share some helpful resources here. Healthy You, it might not be something you're aware of, but there's a link there to the Healthy You pages for the university. Loads of great stuff on there with help and advice in all kinds of areas, and a link to events that go on, things like this PG Wellbeing Week, etc. Are all on there. The University Mental Health Advice, so yeah, that is also, there's a link through Healthy You to that, and there's some specific pages that were sort of set up during the pandemic but have developed and evolved over time to just have a one-stop shop for all your kind of mental health resources and advice. So there's loads of great stuff on there. Researcher Academy, so specifically for postgraduate researchers. There's some wellbeing pages there as well, and there's a great video on there about looking after wellbeing as a PhD researcher, which is really specific and helpful as well. University Counselling Service, as well as being able to book on a one-to-one session, there's loads of great self-help resources on there as well. So do have a look at their pages, things like Headspace and the apps that we mentioned for mindfulness, etc. They're all on there. Sleep resources as well, there's a link there to the NHS sleep pages, which has got some really good stuff if sleep is a bit of an issue for you. And there's also the NHS mental health and wellbeing pages as well, looking at stress, anxiety and depression. Got another slide of these, there's lots of stuff. So yeah, like I say, we will share these afterwards So Student Minds, I think recently they may have had to adapt some of their activities. So yeah, might be worth just looking at their Facebook, see what's happening with that at the moment. But Adapt Together is our PGR and PG, yeah, PGR, isn't it, peer support, which we've talked quite a lot about today, but I think they're a really great resource and really encourage you all to engage with that, particularly if you're looking at meeting others. Kooth is an online wellbeing support for young people, so it's mainly aimed at under 25s, but it's just an interesting website. It's got quite lots of instant messenger facilities, things like that, so it might be worth having a look. You might not have heard of that one. Together All is a really great app that the university have invested in recently. So you can log in with that using your university email, but you can make like an anonymous ID. You know, you could just make a kind of any username on there that you can log in with and take part in chats and groups and things like that, or just have a look at the excellent resources on there, self-led courses, all kinds of things. But yeah, that's something that wouldn't be accessible if you weren't a student here. So certainly something worth having a look at. Motivation course, just wanted to highlight the Researcher Academy motivation course, which is called Light Your Fire. So have a link on a click on that. If the current ones are full, please do add yourself to the waiting list, as this shows demand and will trigger another being run. So we've just got a note on there about December, but yeah, there was some places in January. So do have a look or add yourself to the waiting list. It's a really great course, just you know, working on your motivation. Okay, so yeah, we've just got a link here, which is quite a nice little video you might want to have a look at afterwards about your stress bucket. So it's the sort of idea that all of the stress and all the things that are worrying you are going into the bucket, and if you don't release any valves on that bucket and lets out some things, then it can easily tip over and become very unstable. So do have a look at that and find that quite helpful, that the taps on the bucket are the self-care techniques that we've talked about, and that can just help that not overflow too often. Okay, so yeah, we've got a few minutes left. If anyone has any questions, we'd love to hear them. Pop them in the chat or pop your mic on, that would be great. Yeah, thanks for all your engagement so far. Okay, well, yeah, hopefully we've kind of answered everything in all of those. So we'll pop a link to these slides, won't we, in the chat function afterwards.
We will. I'm just going to hopefully cut and paste a link to the evaluation as well.
Oh yes, good idea.
Just
well remembered.
This to
yes.
See if it works. Bear with me.
Yeah. One of our colleagues, Catherine Morgan, did share it at the start, but I don't think you can sometimes see it until after you've joined the group, can you?
No, I don't think we could see it either. So there's a link to the evaluation, and yes, we will share a PDF of the slides, which so you can access any of the links we've mentioned. They will go into the chat probably later this afternoon. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us and for inputting. It's always really nice to share people's wellbeing tips and ideas, and just to maybe hold a little bit of space for each other to sort of see what each other's doing.
Definitely. So yeah, thanks for that. So yeah, enjoy the rest of PG Wellbeing Week. Do have a look at all the other activities that are going on. There's some really great stuff happening there. So I'm just going to stop recording while I remember. Let me do that.
And if any of you are based at Sutton Bonington or can get there